My constant touchstone for questions of the internet and society is what happened with the printing press. Because that was another example where we had a revolution in the media landscape, not just in the number of consumers of media, but also in the number of producers. And I think with the internet, we can see, obviously, again, a huge increase in the number of people creating content, not just consuming it. And we're starting to see revolutions in culture. Certainly the insurgents in North Africa took these tools and used them to achieve their political goals in ways that they couldn't have done even a few years before, right? The ability to synchronize the opinions of, say, the Tunisian or Egyptian population, coordinate some of the reactions, to document the results. If the state begins attacking, it's all being filmed or photographed. Those are tools being pressed into service for political change of the highest order. We're seeing in the sciences a rise in what we call massively collaborative research. Right? Many more people coming in. Sometimes they're professionals, as in mathematics. Sometimes it's a mix of professionals and amateurs, as with astronomy. But in those cases, we're seeing that the involvement of a much larger group of people is actually making the dynamics of scientific research go faster. And the biggest lesson of all from the printing press is that many of the changes were unpredictable. When the printing press originally showed up, it was being used to print Bibles and indulgences, so it looked like it was all going to be good news for the Catholic Church. And then it ended up being the thing that drove, it ended up being a tool used for the Reformation, used by Martin Luther famously to great advantage. The ability of scientific journals to distribute information was a critical part of the rise of science. And so I think many of the things we're seeing today with social tools, excuse me, things we're seeing today with social tools like the North African revolutions or like changes in research are really early entries into general use of these tools that are going to affect all aspects of society just as the printing press did. Society's never ready for these kinds of changes when they come, right? That the change, any big change, is always going to be a surprise, and it's always going to create a difference between the population that can participate and the population that can't participate. So what we're seeing right now is that in some cases people are ready to embrace these tools and are using them to good advantage. And in other cases there are people who either are afraid of the tools or confused by the tools. One of the things we're seeing is that there is a group of people who are very excited about these tools and are embracing them and putting them to good use. There's another group of people who either don't understand the tools or are actively afraid of or dislike the tools. And that always happens when a new idea spreads through society. It never happens everywhere all at once. I think we've left the phase where there's a small group of true believers and then a large part of society that either isn't interested or doesn't believe that this is going to be important. I think that the ways we've seen these tools being pressed into service now has alerted a fairly large section of the population that new ways of coordinating large groups of people means new effects in culture, new effects in politics, new effects in the sciences. What we're now seeing is the spread from the insurgents into the population at large. And what we don't know yet is where the new equilibrium state is, right? There are some things that are going to be transformed utterly by these tools. There's some things that are going to be affected a little bit. There's some things that are going to be basically left alone. We don't know how far that goes, but society is never ready for that kind of change. What happens instead is we get ready for it by going through the change. And so a bit at a time, we're coming to understand that these social tools are giving us new ways of doing things, and we're integrating those new ways of doing things in our expectations about how life both is and how it should be or could be. You know, I don't want to say correct or appropriate in the sense of my judgment about how things should be. I don't want to set myself up as any kind of pope of technology that has a better idea than the average person. What I think instead is that the civic uses of these tools, not just to entertain each other, but to actually create valuable change in the world, that requires a lot of additional effort. The use of these tools in political circumstances requires people to actually have a vision about how politics should go. The use of these tools for researchers, for instance, one example is Patients Like Me, this group that's aggregating medical information to make medical research better. That's not just a simple aggregation of information. Patients Like Me is saying, we think people should share medical information because it's philosophically the right thing to do. So what I think will really guide the development of the important uses of these tools, the socially transformative use of these tools, is when committed individuals say, we're going to do this not just because it's easier or cheaper, but we're going to do this because it's the way society should be. And it's those changes, and I wouldn't, again, I wouldn't want to use the labels correct or appropriate because we don't yet know what those changes are going to be. But it's those changes when we've seen them in other places in the past, open source software, the creation of Wikipedia, that have actually led to the creation of tremendous new resources. And I think that as these tools move deeper into society, we're going to see that same process repeat itself. In politics, the great possibility right now is increased participation by the citizens in discussions of political matters and in the design of solutions. Right now, we elect people and then they represent us in a Congress or a parliament because we can't have a large-scale social conversation. But in some cases, we now can have a large-scale social conversation. We can actually go to the populace. So one political change there will be finding ways to get citizens to actively discuss current political problems and what the solution should be rather than just proxying everything to the representatives. That, if it does indeed happen, will be a huge change in the way democratic countries run themselves. I've already mentioned the scientific changes in sort of large-scale participation in research. Educationally, it's going to be very tricky because educational institutions, particularly colleges and universities, send two different messages. They say, we're going to educate each individual, and also we're going to bring everybody into this scholarly conversation. But one is personal and the other is collaborative. And what these tools have done is simultaneously give individuals access to an unbelievably large amount of information that you used to have to work hard to give them, while at the same time making it much, much easier to collaborate than it used to be. So I think that colleges and universities in particular are going to swing more towards collaborative and interdisciplinary work and away from assuming that the filling of an individual mind with knowledge is their goal, and more about producing students who are good at sharing, good at working with people who have different kinds of understanding. And again, as with politics, as with science, that's going to be a huge change, a cultural change in the educational establishment. But that's the possibility these tools seem to hold out.